Hi everyone. Today we are covering variable shadowing and the temporal dead zone, two concepts that trip up many JavaScript developer. So let's break them down with the practical example. So first question is, what is variable shadowing? Variable shadowing happens when an inner scope variables has the same name as an outer scope variables, hiding the outer one. What it means? Suppose you are const username, you are storing the username equal Alice. Okay. Then create a function. This function will be a greet parameter don't need, and again const username. Remember. Now use this Bob. This is the shadows outer username. Okay. Now the console log call the username. It actually return as an output Bob. At first call this function, invoke this function, and then console log user name. Okay. But something happening here. It actually calling Alice, not this one. This one actually calling here as a inner scope, but you are calling the user name, right? It actually call the this one. Anyway, next is the shadowing with the different keywords. Suppose let score is 10. If true, then let the score 20. And legal shadowing here and console log it. That means when we are console log the score, it actually showing this variable, right? But this code not execute. It execute the score. We didn't do anything here, right? Just calling the condition. This is the legal shadowing anyway. But another is the illegal shadowing. You cannot shadow a let or const with the var in the same functional scope. It means, example, there is a value, let is the value. Then you are calling this value, this variable with the var keyword. Then this is a syntax error. Okay, this failed because this var is the functional scope, right? And conflict with the let declaration. But this work. The var is the value, then in this condition, let is value. It's fine, but the let is the block scope, and we are using this let in this block scope. Okay, that's why this is fine. And this is a global, and this is a block scope, global scope and block scope. Okay, now the temporal dead zone. So, what is the temporal dead zone? The temporal dead zone is the period between entering a scope and the actual declaration of a let and const variable. Suppose before we are calling any let or const, we console log the value. This one. And there is another thing, the temporal dead zone and the hoisting. Check this one. There is a var. Remember, this is a var. In this var, when we try to console log this variable, it actually showing you the undefined because this variable doesn't have any value at the beginning, but they know they are stored global scope. But when we are using this let, it actually immediately showing the reference error because this var is hoisted and initialized with the undefined, but let and const are hoisted but not initialized. They remain in the temporal dead zone. So, temporal dead zone in the block scope, this is a variable and this is your block scope. In this block scope, when we are try to console log, it actually showing the reference error. But where in this block scope, when we store any variable with the same name, it's showing the inner x is in temporal dead zone. Okay. Why temporal dead zone is exist? Caches error early, makes const work properly, and thirdly encourage declaring variables before use. That's why temporal dead zone is exist, and this is important. If you logically think that why we want to console log something before it initialize, isn't it illogical? So for the best practices, check this code. This is 3 example. First is the declare variable at the top. Second is the use unique name to avoid shadowing. Third is the prefer const, use let when need, avoid var. And we already seen these types of example before. This is not in too much. Just in this lesson, we actually try to understand the concept, how they work and why they exist and why they are important when we are working in the future. Okay, this is important, and this is also another topic or another lesson or another question interviewer asking in the interview. So you see, const, let, and then call. This is actually declaring variable at the top, right? And unique name to avoid the shadowing, and this is important. Most of the developer are encourage you to always use the unique name for avoiding the confusion, because same name would be confused you, not only others. Check config and user config. You see, this is different. It's really cleaning code, and you immediately understood what is happening here and which variable what it means, right? This means this object actually dark, and user config is actually the light. Another is the prefer const. Use let when needed, avoid var. Always use the const when we need the repeatable reassigning, then use the let. Otherwise, don't need that. Great. So that's the variable shadowing and the temporal dead zone. Shadowing hides the outer variable, while the temporal dead zone is the period before the let const initialization. You can subscribe for more JavaScript content. Drop your question in the comments below. See you in the next video.